To the cloud. All right, welcome everyone to this iteration of the Community Policing Working Group Ad Hoc, specifically working on the proposed new policy to the community policing program for the Oakland Police Department. My name is Jesse Shea. I am the chair. I'm joined by Commissioners Brenda Harp and Forte. Usually Commissioner Howell joins us by phone. I think I'll let him know when he comes in and so that I can promote him. I think we've had a regular recurring cast, but today we have a new member with us, Mr. Farmer, as a representative of the SSOC. Thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps you could give us a few words about yourself and your interest in this, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Dorado.
Thank you very much for the gracious introduction. I'm Omar Farmer. I'm a commissioner for the SSOC. My interest in being here is just my interest in helping improve community policing, probably the same interest that a lot of us have, making sure that it coincides with what we'd like to see happen in the community. I've also been on the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, a couple Oakland Police Commission ad hoc committees, and just a community activist. And just really glad to be here with you all and looking forward to get started.
Thank you so much. Jose, I'm going to turn it over to you and sort of fade into the background and make this font a little better for everyone to see.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, Mr. Farmer. You've got some big shoes to fill in Palo Hawthorne. That I can assure you. So we're looking forward to your input, especially with your perspective and your background. And hello, Mike. I didn't say good morning. How are you doing? And I didn't hardly recognize you, Jesse, with your watch cap on. We didn't, if I remember correctly, we didn't have a real definitive leave off point in our last meeting. So we could start right here at section 3.
Yeah, so we had talked very briefly about roles and we finished off roles and responsibilities for the community resource officers. We talked very briefly about roles for the sergeants and the lieutenants, and Lieutenant Fable referred us back to measure Y, and I will be looking through that and seeing if edits are appropriate. And this is going to be specifically starting us off in the community meeting section, which is specifically talking about, well, what attendances do we want, what might be mandatory, discretionary, and how that might be tracked, and what we want to see out of our community resource officers at those meetings. I will also acknowledge that I think is it acting captain? I always forget. Acting Captain Johnson is here with us as well.
I think it's acting captain.
Actually, that's acting captain, acting lieutenant.
Acting lieutenant. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
and
thank you.
I think I see Rudy.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Mr. Farmer, do you have a chance to pull up the document that we're working from?
Briefly, I've had a chance to look at it, but not in detail yet.
Okay, but you do have it.
I do. Yes,
okay,
Mr. Shea sent it to me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're gonna basically what we're doing is wordsmithing, and with the idea that we'll come up with a document that then we can present to the full commission. Brenda.
Yeah, am I the only one getting sort of a feedback or scratchy or static or something? Is anybody else hearing static?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Who is where can we identify what's causing it? It seems to happen no matter who is speaking. So it must be something with the system.
I think we just make sure that everyone mutes after they're finished talking, just to be sure. I'm not sure who it is necessarily. That might just be it.
Well, it just stopped. So hopefully,
yeah,
hopefully whatever it was, it went away.
Okay, great. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so this is as I was going to say, this is a really important section, but heck, all the sections are really important. But what we have here in terms of language regarding community programs, or I should say community meetings, is really important. And I say that because it's going to lay out the roles and responsibilities of the CRO in terms of their direct contact with the community. So as we've done in the past, we've gone pretty much section or sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. So let's just start with this section here, 3, and the Roman numeral 9, community meetings. Is there any additions, deletions, or changes we should make to that first sentence of appropriate personnel, etc.?
I know that I'll acknowledge that Commissioner Howell has joined us. I know he's calling us by phone, so it might help to read this section. I know it's painful, but read for the benefit of anybody who is not on video, to read the section that we're talking about specifically.
All righty.
I got a copy. I have a copy. Just show me this. Just let me know the section you're at.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Section 3, programs, partnerships, and collaborations. Roman numeral 9,
Okay.
community meetings. That first sentence, starting with appropriate personnel. And
Got
good
it.
morning, Rudy.
Good morning.
So any additions, deletions, or changes we want to make to that first sentence? If not, then let's go on to A, attendance at community meetings. That first sentence, BFO personnel. Any changes, deletions, etc.? Now, I had a couple of questions about this section. Acting Lieutenant Johnson, how essential is this filling out of the public appearance report, PAR TF 3225?
Well, I know it was in the Measure Z from last time. This is something that we actually use to track what officers have gone to the meetings. So it's fairly important.
Okay, thank you. In any case, any changes, additions, deletions on that first sentence? If not, how about number 1, personnel receiving, etc.? I guess this is all regarding the details of filling out the PAR TF 3225. How about 2? If no changes, 3? If none, then let's go on to B, records management. So we're good with that first part then. Records management, the PARs shall be maintained, etc. So number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So I had a question, Acting Lieutenant Johnson, is the monthly, would the monthly summary report be publicly available? The one on mentioned in number 4?
I'm not quite sure if that'll be publicly available. I'd have to actually look into that.
Okay, would you?
I'm pretty sure that, and you're talking about as far as I'm trying to read through this real quick. I'm on my cell phone to do it.
Well, we'll hang on.
Yeah, I believe it will be, but I'm not quite sure. I'd have to follow up with possibly with Captain Febble or to make sure that it would be available.
Would you check on that and get back to us, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, then if we're good, aside from that question, if we're good with part B, records management, maintenance, I should say, let's then go on to C, presentations at community meetings.
Just so that you
I'm sorry?
all know, I'm trying to pull up BGO B7, the public appearance policy, so that we all know what the document is that's being referenced and whether that needs to be supplemented in this policy.
Ah,
And Jesse, the record should reflect that Pastor Thompson has joined us now.
good morning, Pastor Jackie.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
everyone. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. So we're on C, presentations at community meetings. Starting with depending on assignment, etc. Any changes, any additions, deletions, comments on that first, those first two sentences under presentations? Okay, and then continuing on to 1. Send an Outlook calendar invite, etc.
Hey, excuse me, on C, and that first part, it says, like the third line down, when presenting a community meeting, the assigned, is it CRO or NSC? Should do the following.
The CRO, the NSC
CRO,
are no
okay.
longer part of the police department.
Okay. Because the copy I got has them both up there, then it has NSC crossed out.
Yeah, that's what I have as well.
Okay.
Any changes to number 1? Send an Outlook calendar invite, etc. If not, the calendar invite should include B priorities and CRO contact information. That's a really important element of this calendar invite, I would think. That's the only comment I have on 1. So we're good with this section down to the end of 1. If so, let's move on to 2, provide an agenda.
Jesse, can you advance the screen, Jesse? I mean, scroll up. Okay, great.
Thank you. Any comment? I have a comment on this, but I wanted to open it up. How about 2? Anything, any changes we think are appropriate, or any deletions, additions, etc.?
Jose, so on the first one, you were saying about you wanted contact information under the first one?
Yes.
Because they have it on the second one as A, contact information.
Yeah, I was more, it wasn't so much the contact information as it was the beat priorities.
Priorities, okay.
Yeah, I would very much like the CRO to let everybody on that list from A through G know what B priorities he or she is dealing with.
So that'd be a part of 1, like H, right? Beat priorities?
It can be, but they had it at the end that the calendar invite should include beat priorities and CRO contact information. So I'm assuming that.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Okay. So in 2, my comment was I'm a little unclear as to the use of an agenda, provide an agenda. Acting Lieutenant Johnson, maybe you can help me with this, but that my confusion is that the agenda should be of a meeting, certainly a neighborhood council meeting, should be formulated by the community organization and certainly the neighborhood council. So I'm a little confused as to the use of the word agenda. Can you you have any insight into that?
Not really, but I believe that for the agenda, it should be done by the NC. And I think it's for the purposes that the CRO can be put on the agenda for each council meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. So I would suggest that the change in two relate more to the CRO presentation will minimally include, and then the A through F items. How does that sound, everybody?
And
Sounds good.
yeah, Pastor Jackie had a suggestion in the chat to change the language to,
Yeah, it's similar. It's similar. Using the word presentation topics. It's similar to what was said. Should minimally
Okay.
include those areas.
Great, thank you, Pastor Jackie.
take the S off and take the S off to include.
Thank you. All right, great. All right, any, are we good with the A through F items that would be addressed?
Let me ask you one other thing before we leave too. It seemed to me that what this was providing that was that before you go to the meeting, you have an agenda, present an agenda.
Begin.
And so we're now taking away from the requirement that they present an agenda, something in writing to the neighborhood councils that say, this is what I'm going to address. So do we really want to say, why not allow them something in writing, give them something in writing before the meeting? Which is
Are they currently providing written agendas? Because I've attended a few and I haven't seen a written agenda from a CRO.
Yeah, with that, yeah, there may be a number of things they're not complying with, but that's fine. And apparently, the written agenda isn't that important to the attendees. But maybe if they leave something at the end of the meeting, that would help for future reference.
Mr. Farmer?
Yes, thank you. So for 2F, the summary of the key activities, are we talking about CROs discussing, I don't know, maybe we could be a little bit more specific about conducting intelligence-based or violence suppression operations, something to that effect? Or is that already mentioned somewhere? I was just curious, maybe that'll help define it a little bit more, but maybe it's covered somewhere else.
Well, I don't know that it is in specific, like violence suppression operations. That certainly could be added after key activities, for example, violence suppression activities related to these items.
Yeah, that's all I was thinking, right? Just maybe be a little bit specific after that, because that's specifically stated in like the Measure Z ordinance, for example. So,
Hey, Joe, I just talked to Captain Febble. He doesn't have rights to speak. He's actually online.
Okay.
He's the 8219168 there. I just gave it with a hand up.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you have any comments on this section, Acting Captain Tebble?
No, Mr. Dorado, the only comment I had is that I do agree with yourself and Captain Johnson in that I think the agenda should be always set by the community, right? We're here to empower community and kind of detract from the mindset that the police are first and kind of the tip of the spear in in community empowerment, right? So I think there's nothing wrong with us taking a back seat and just and filling in with the agenda as opposed to creating the agenda.
No, I really appreciate that because that's exactly what should be happening. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Anything else that we would like to see under item 2?
Hold on one second. Let's get Omar's changes to F. It's in the chat. Which was key activities, including but not limited to intelligence-based and or violent suppression operations. How about intelligence-based and violent suppression, intelligence-based or violent suppression operations? That's my pet peeve, those and or. Is it both or is it one or the other?
Say crime suppression, so that it's, a little bit
Is it one? Yeah.
more geared towards, well, I don't know, should it be violence or crime?
Yeah, and crime suppression operations. I think the and is best.
All those pesky words.
And or drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy. Like, what is it? Is one or the other both? Or are they alternate? And do we just want crime suppression operations? Do we need violence or?
Crime suppression would be fine.
Yeah, it'll include violence on it.
I think that's actually a great suggestion. Crime prevention, you could remove the violence component to it because there are definitely very needy crime prevention operations that CROs will engage in that are not necessarily involved in immediately violent crime, but like human trafficking, terrible thing, and we need to address that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So one thing I wanted to ask was, at the commission meetings, we have started to receive not just the crime trends and crime rates, but also stop data and use of force data. I don't know if that's broken by beat or area. That may be challenging. I don't know the capabilities, but is that something that we think should go into these presentation topics?
Guys, I'm going to be honest with you. So I'm a big part of our risk management teams and reviews. That data is, first of all, it's typically kind of late, right? Like we're still going through our 2021 data, and we literally have a partner, a professional staff member who has a doctorate who analyzes that data. I think it would be unwise for us to have a CRO who does not have subject matter expertise in risk management or even data analysis to present on those stats. We want to be able to give the most transparent and accurate answer to the community. We don't want to deviate on either side. So I would just caution that.
What I will put in, perhaps, well, let me think what do other people think?
I'm inclined to agree that with the proviso that OPD on a consistent basis puts out the information, the stop data information to the public in a digestible form, so that in fact the community is informed on a consistent basis of what the stop data looks like after it's been analyzed by the OPD resources. So that would be my own, and so I'm inclined to agree with Acting Captain Febble regarding the CRO's reporting on this. I would prefer that it come from straight from OPD, so long as it's done transparently and consistently.
Yeah, great point, Mr. Dorado. That's what we do. So after these quarterly reports are properly analyzed, all the way from our statisticians to the chief, they put out a public report on those.
Great.
Mike?
Mike? Yeah.
A question to Jesse. Jesse, you say you received these reports at commission meetings. Are they part of the agenda?
They are now.
They're written reports. So
Yeah.
the neighborhood councils would have access to them. Are they broken down by district, or it's just the whole city? Okay, I got you. So it wouldn't be area specific.
It is area specific, sir. To include our new Area 6, it's definitely area specific.
Oh, then we don't have that.
Yeah, well, it's brand new for 2022.
Okay.
So yeah, that'll come out, which is great, because then you could see people like myself who are in the acting captain role, and you could certainly see how we're directing our people and who it affects, and and that's a good accountability measure to make sure we're treating everybody fairly and equitably.
Mr. Farmer?
You could say when the data has already been provided through a police commission meeting or something to that effect, that the CROs will just present that data to their NCPC meetings when it's already been published, something like that.
And then how much of that will be caught when they do the summary of the key activities? I'm sure will that have like a rest for the area, or what would the key activities? That's by area, beat area.
So what the data stop data shows? I mean, it shows a tremendous amount of data, but it basically shows how many stops we're making on dispatch stops. Well, how many stops are we making that aren't dispatched? Well, what's the demographic by race of who we're stopping? Are we searching them? Does it result in an arrest? Does it result in a complaint? Does it result in positive feedback or evidence of a recovery? That is all out there to be presented. But what I caution you on is that CROs, they are not data analysts. And having dealt with this data for over 2 years, it is very detailed, and it could be interpreted in many ways. And relying on somebody who has no expertise in that matter to present that data and answer questions to the community, it's just not a good idea, being honest with you. If we want answers to risk management data, that should come from the source, which would be Dr. Grossman from our analyst part. The CRO is simply not qualified to answer those questions.
Okay.
But
What about? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So he's gonna do, the CRO is still gonna do the summary of key activities, right? So that's like a general presentation of the activities or operations that OPD is doing. And if they report on that, is there going to be some overlap of the data that the statistician will get? You know what I mean? Because it seems like, they're already reporting on the key activities. Maybe we need to delineate or identify, just make sure we know what activities the community wants reported on. And then the statistician can do the number crunching and give meaning to the data. But at least people know by area, like, okay, in this area we had this many arrests or whatever. Or is that what you're saying gets too complicated?
No. So the challenge is what that essentially would ask a CRO to do is have a vision of the entire district and its crime rollout strategy. It's highly out of their purview. They can actually report on all of the activities that are being done within the CROs in their own division. But essentially, that data would be coming from me, the captain, because I have the VCOC, I have Ceasefire, I have CID, I have numerous entities that all compile into that data set that is very far outside of the CRO. So they simply would not have the time to know my entire crime plan and strategies for each meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you look at F, what's being reported in F? In number 2F, summary of key activities. Who's doing that reporting? That's the CRO, right? Because that's supposed to be included in the agenda.
The CRO will report out on the key items that they are engaged in, not what every other unit is engaged in. They simply can't track that data. It's not a reasonable
Okay,
request.
but so they can at least report what they're engaged in that beat area, right?
Absolutely, and it totally should.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, that's just a general, overlook of that area that they can report on that they're directly familiar with, and then all the other numbers still get crunched by the statistician, and then that report comes out separate. So maybe we need to identify more of these key activities that the CRO is engaged in, and delineate it. Make it more definite, because it's the key activities. So we have a constant standard of what activities we're going to look to be reported by the CRO, and that's just what they're involved in for F, and because it just says K activities, and then we mentioned too, we said intelligent crime suppression operations, and then is there any more things or key activities that can be talked about or summarized by the CRO? Maybe we should get more definite topics as key activities.
Pastor Jackie.
Thank you. Jose, if you can scroll back up, just a note in the paragraph and then a question. So that original paragraph, when presenting at a community meeting. So that sentence there, when presenting at a community meeting, the assigned CRO should do the following in order to ensure citywide consistency. And then just a clarity question for my understanding, since the original topic was about the stop data, am I to understand that it is not necessarily current when it is shared? And if that's the case, then is that something that we should even be referencing at this point for what we think would be consistent presentations at community meetings?
Yeah, my answer would be that the majority of the presentations by the CRO should be on beat specific topics.
Okay.
And just quickly commenting on anything outside, obviously that would, let's take ceasefire, for example, and stop data. If in fact it's something citywide or even district-wide, that should be a brief part of the report if it's touched on at all. If it's a specific report that the neighborhood council would want to hear about ceasefire again or stop data, then that's different. But on a regular basis outside of that, I would say the farther out it gets from the beat, the less time that should be spent by the CRO on his or her presentation.
Okay.
Brenda.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jackie.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we had that clarity so we didn't spend a lot of time belaboring the point, and maybe we can talk about where to include that level of reporting in the other section where reporting came out. There was another section where we dealt with reports that should be given or shared at the end of the year, and maybe that can be included, because I think to expect the CRO to present information that may not even be current to what has gone on in that beat at that time takes away from important matters that the beat is dealing with at the moment. And so I think being able to refer members of the community to where they can get that information, or if it's a website, if it's a link, or if there's a special presentation, however that's going to happen, I think that might be a better way to go. Because personally, if I'm at an NSC meeting, I'm not sure if there are current things going on. I want to hear stop data from 2020.
Okay.
That doesn't really help me, us in this moment, but I would love to know where to get it. So thank you. Thank
you, Pastor Jackie. Brenda.
Yeah, I was just gonna, the language in F, summary of the CRO's key activities. So we know it's just a CRO, it's CRO specific.
Yeah, I think it's really important that, did you have something else, Pastor Jackie? Got your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just didn't know how to lower it. Hold on. Okay.
Thank you. Brenda, you still on?
I'm good. Yes, I meant to, I'm trying to lower my hand too. Sorry.
Okay.
That was it. That was just to change that what the report is going to be on the will be on the CRO's key activities. So everybody understands it's not going to be citywide and stuff.
Right. Okay. So I think that's the overall point that I think we're all in agreement that it should be beat specific information that takes up the majority of the presentation by the CRO, and anything else included minimally, including stop data. There should be reference as to where the information can be gotten, but not a real time drain on the CRO's presentation. So if the language pretty much reflects that agreement under 2.
Yeah, Omar had a suggestion in the chat.
And has his hand.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in real quick. I'm okay with what it says under 2F, but just to Commissioner Howell's point, if we did want to be more definitive under key activities, this is just language straight from the Measures E ordinance that they want CROs to cover in their respective meetings. But it may not be relevant to every beat, every meeting either. So. But if we did want to be more specific here or somewhere else in the document, that's just an example of what we could say.
Let me just make a side point, and that is that perhaps something like stop data, that of course is important, as well as ceasefire and more general citywide topics, that may well be a important topic that can be covered in meetings of the neighborhood councils on an area-wide basis that I hope would be held on a consistent basis. So that may well be something that Area 6, Area 5 may be very, very interested in. That is all of the neighborhood councils. So that's something that hopefully will happen at that level as well. So are we good with number 2?
So
Yeah,
just so
that's
that everyone knows the edits that I'm making here and sort of how it tracks the conversation, I'm adding in beat, the word beat, to as many places as I can where it makes sense, so that it's clear to the CRO that they should be presenting on the beat specific. I'm adding in the list that Mr. Farmer mentioned as a parenthetical right now. I think CRO key activities may be outside of the Measure Z activities, and since we want our CROs not just to be reporting and have information about specific crime fighting police department measures, but also legal law enforcement measures that they're engaging in, such as coordinating with city officials or whatever it may be. I'm gonna leave this open right now, but have the list there so we have it, and then maybe we can come back to it. And with respect to the point that sometimes some beats may have requests for specific information or be interested in things like stop data or ceasefire, I have under miscellaneous items at the moment, information on requested topics or where other information can be found, to Pastor Jackie's point, if I want to know where other information is.
That looks good.
Okay. And then we'll we'll be consistent in whether we capitalize the B and beat or not.
Anyone got to have an
Just a
opinion about that?
Yeah, I would capitalize it.
Okay.
So whenever it's referred to.
And put an and/or in there somewhere.
Beat and or. Thanks, Jose.
I had to throw that out.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a good one.
So we are we good with 2 then? This is really good conversation. I mean, this is just stellar. So I'm really happy that we're really looking over and taking into account all the different considerations, particularly something as important as the CRO's presentations.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the key activities, we get a little more structure to them, so we know what we're asking for, and it can be customized per beat, and then beat priorities, they can be customized per beat, like, you know, if one area in particular has a unusual amount of tow activity or something, and then he can speak on that if he has that information available. Just whatever is germane to his beat or that he works on a lot. You know, if we can get that delineated, so it's not just a general key activities, but maybe some more definite structure to what the activities are, which activities each beat is focusing on.
Let me make one comment and just see what people think. Regarding D, which is going to be, I would think, a fairly interesting part of the CRO's presentation, crime trends and crime rates. What do people think about adding to that, these trends and crime rates be tendered to the neighborhood council in advance of the meeting, if possible? And I say that because if in fact people have already seen this data, they may well have a leg up on any questions that they may have. So just some feedback. Brenda?
Not to your point, but to Rudy's point, I would like for us to specify tow activities in particular, because I think that there's a lot of towing activity that's going on, and the cars that are being towed are the cars of Black and brown people in certain neighborhoods. And there's a concern as well that the police department is towing these cars without any kind of notice to the owners, just grabbing them, calling tow trucks. And it's getting to be a real concern. People have to get they're out of money when they try to go down to get their car back. They can ask for a hearing to try to get their money back. But if there's anything that's going on tow activities, people need to know about it.
That's a good point. So
I see that acting captain's hand is up.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, hey, thank you, Mr. Dorado. No, that's a great point, ma'am. In fact, you know, that's something that was brought up with the city. And as a result, they're in the 9th inning of discussions to make our abandoned auto team follow under the city administrator's office. Right now, rumor is that should fully take place in June. Just kind of like NSCs, we're totally separated from the department to ensure that there's no conflict of interest there. They're doing the same with our abandoned auto unit, which does over 90% of all tows in the city. That should hopefully take place in June.
Okay, then. And at some point, there may need to be some to the extent it remains under OPD, there needs to be some training in constitutional rights. That may well be a very big issue pretty soon. You just can't take people's property without due process. So if you're rolling up,
agreed, and
towing things, kind of like, hey,
livelihood.
I'm sorry.
I said, no, I totally agree, because vehicles are people's livelihood. You can't get to work if you don't have a car. And so that's a large part of our procedural justice training. And even our new policy, it's not new, actually, it's been around for about 8 years, where we don't just simply tow people's vehicles because they're unlicensed or things of that nature. It has to be pretty egregious acts to tow a vehicle. But we are certainly aware of the issue and the potential negative impact it can have on the community.
And the big issue is towing them off the street, saying that they're abandoned vehicles, not putting any notice on the cars to say your vehicle's going to be towed if you don't move it, or we got a report of an abandoned vehicle, and just going in and towing, and and you go down when you go down there to try to get your vehicle back, and to pay the storage fees. Those are Black and brown people in there trying to get their vehicles.
Yeah, it's not
so
20
it's like
bucks.
Ferguson, if we're
hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, close to $1,000, and many days, even after a couple days. And so we know that in Ferguson, they were using all kinds of funds like towing money and everything else to fund city service.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. Farmer?
So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Farmer,
So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So we need to make sure that that's something. I speak from personal. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah, just to jump in on the tow activity, I think that we've been discussing at my NCPC meetings is also just unhoused operations. Um, so maybe worth mentioning that. I know that's a citywide epidemic, and macro is still in process, I guess, in their pilot period or whatnot. We've been discussing that too. So maybe that might be something to add since it seems to affect every neighborhood.
I would agree. Anything else on item F? If not, I'm requesting some feedback regarding D, the trends and rates being provided to the neighborhood council prior to the neighborhood council meeting, again, if possible, so that people have a chance to analyze it, digest it, and come up with any appropriate questions. What do people think about that? Captain Felble, after Captain Felble.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. So, I think that's great, right? Because I think that meetings, the attendance of an NCPC meeting is very important to the public. People have very busy lives trying to feed their families. They have 60 minutes to attend a meeting, and they want to have relevant data and get their questions answered immediately. Providing the data ahead of time really helps narrow the scope of the meeting. I think that's important. And if we have time, I could quickly discuss some stats that we could reasonably apply prior to each meeting that a CRO should have full access to.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other comments?
Why
regarding
don't
Justin?
we just have that discussion right now?
Okay. I would suggest adding the community beat crime trends and crime rates provided to the NC before their meetings, if possible.
And then the topics, what data is available prior?
So the data we could accurately and consistently provide to the community is we could provide the quarterly data for crime trends, such as for each area, right? So we could say for area 5, for example, carjackings would be up 20%, homicide would be up 50%, but street level robbery would be down 15%. We could provide that data. Also very important is that we could provide shot spotter data. That changes every 3 weeks. So that would be relevant to every meeting. We could see our trends in shot spotter data. And we could also show actual trends in overlaid locations of where robberies are occurring. So what's nice about the shot spotter data and the robbery data and the shooting data is it doesn't just say it's up or down. It actually shows where it's occurring. Oh, you know what? I apologize, guys. I have to get department approval to disseminate that. I may not be able to because of 1040. Our judge on the line would probably know better. You know what? I may not actually be able to put that data out. That would have to go through the department.
You're talking about the overlaid locations, not the shot spotter or the quarterly data, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's said very
investigation.
specifically it's confidential for 1040 of the evidence code. So I apologize for bringing that up if we can't do it.
No worries. Anything else? I mean, it sounds like, okay, so that's data that comes through, that we see twice a week at commission meetings. We both have the entire city as well as broken down by area. Can we get more granular than that? Can we bring beat specific information?
We certainly can. We just can't talk about it like we got a report on this date at this time, like very detailed of each one. Like I couldn't give the actual data sheet out that's presented by a crime analyst, but we could absolutely talk that one next layer up and say, hey guys, beat 27 had 3 robberies in 1 week, in this week. We could get that granular.
I think that would be very, very useful and very interesting to the people on the beat. So if that can be provided ahead of time, better yet. So I'd love to see that.
It's easy data to access. It's not an unreasonable request at all.
And then so these meetings occur depending on the beat once every month, once every 2 months. Is it possible, like how far is it up? Is the data available up to the date of the meeting and as far back as, say, the last meeting, or does it need to be a little bit further back than that? Say, like you can only get to 2 weeks before the meeting?
No, that's a good question. So the data would be, and of course, it would depend upon when the meeting was actually held, but typically the data would not be older than 2 weeks, worst case scenario. Because I present out on it at every shooting review, and the data is within 3 weeks. And you actually want 3-week-old data because it can show a trend.
So the date, let me make sure I understand the date, the range of the data would be back to the beginning, to the last meeting up to 2 or 3 weeks before the coming meeting. Is that the idea, Jesse?
I don't know
Yeah.
what I don't know what the
That's what it
range
would
should be. I mean, I think it depends on each beat and how often they meet. Maybe they just want like quarterly reports, or maybe they want, from the last time we met. It's just
Okay.
up to the beat, right? It sounds like the capability is there, is what Captain Fable was saying.
Okay.
Definitely there. Absolutely.
Okay. That's great. I'd have to think that there'd be a lot of beats, a lot of people that are be interested in this data, particularly if it's provided to them before the meeting. And it also cuts down on the time having to be spent by the CRO to go over this data, if in fact it was provided ahead of time. So it's a win-win, I think. Anything else on D regarding this point? If not, let's go ahead and move on. We're good with everything on 2, I'm assuming. We're good? Okay, then let's go down to 3.
Nothing to add for 3.
Okay, 4. And 5. Any comments on what Jesse has highlighted?
Is it just a duplicate of what we just put above?
It certainly appears that way in terms of the trends and rates.
Can we just put it in one place? Is there any need to duplicate it?
Certainly that one point, but the one thing that I want to touch on and get feedback from the group is that I wanted to, my personal preference is that the CRO report at the neighborhood council meetings the status of the priorities relevant to the SARA process. And so what I want to make sure of is that not only does that happen, but also that the reports that are given to it talks about that farther down, reports given to the chair and the vice chair of the neighborhood council at the completion of each step, obviously without compromising any police actions or activities or investigations. So I wanted to make sure that that was kept in mind as we're going through the CRO reports and the requirements that we put down.
Let's
we
be clear, because this is about meetings, right? This is about the public meetings that are occurring as opposed to the reports or the roles and responsibilities that we outlined in the section above.
Yeah, so back to Brenda's point, I think we may well be able to either leave the crime statistics of the area and beat, because in fact that's that's pretty general.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but my point is, can't we put this above? We've already said that when you come to the meetings, you're expected to report on this.
Oh, I think I see what happened, because the original version, this is what's required in the meeting. The previous section was not about presentations. The previous section was about providing an agenda for the meeting prior. Right, so this section this is now a duplicate because we've changed the character of the above section.
Okay, yeah, and that's my point.
Yeah,
because we took away agenda. We're saying now when you come to the meeting, you're expected to provide reports on this. So to the extent that that the above does not include these specific things, let's make sure they include them, and then it seems that we should be able to take out most of 5 altogether. I'm not sure at the bottom, that last sentence says OPD staff should consider hosting community meetings and other events in different areas in the beat. Even that could be put up. Well, it's a
Yeah.
different point. Maybe that's all we need in number 5.
Yeah, well, and it may be that we can eliminate 5 entirely, but certainly I'd like to see that we I have a client calling me, that we eliminate that number 5. I mean, that last OPD staff, because that should not be a decision made by OPD staff, to be made a decision by the community.
Okay.
Estoy en una junta.
Oh, es que iba a ir por los cheques. Le
Sí,
dije a
ven,
esta-
ven.
Ahí está.
Sí,
Ok,
ya.
perfecto. Ahí
Okay,
pasó, ahí pasó.
okay.
Gracias.
Excuse me.
No worries. So yeah, so we'll just make sure that what's in the other part of 5 is included in 2, and then we delete the rest of 5. And then Jose, your point about staff, whether OPD staff should consider hosting a community meeting. You don't want staff to consider that?
No, I think the hosting of community meetings should be decisions made by the neighborhood council or the community organizations themselves.
Okay, so staff shouldn't initiate a community meeting.
Yeah, I think that's something that the community should do.
So if I could just take a moment to step back, and I'm sorry, with the way that we've modified 2 and sort of thinking about getting rid of 5, we now have eliminated the requirement that there is an agenda provided in advance. Are we okay with that?
Yeah, and that was my point originally about the
Yeah.
use of the word. The agenda should be made up by the neighborhood council.
Very good.
So we're just, Brenda, we're just going to see to it that 5 is integrated
Correct.
into 2.
Yes, yes, as long as it's integrated, we're good.
Okay. All right, if we're good with that.
There is there another comment from someone, from Anonymous? We
Well,
have
that comment-
Anonymous.
That I think everyone who touches this document is anonymous unless they sign in.
I
It's a
see,
question
okay.
of whether this should be a requirement, and should neighborhood councils direct CROs what information should be reported at meetings. This might have been my note, I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, I think we're covered.
All righty. So if we're good up to this point, the end of 5, let's go on to 6.
Mhm. And we got CRO and NSC interaction. Oh, okay, all right.
So this is a little bit trickier because this was when this section of this policy was made when NSCs were still part of OPD, right?
Mhm.
And so we could direct CROs and NSCs to collaborate, but now that NSCs are no longer part of OPD, we can no longer make that directive towards NSCs. So I think perhaps we could leave it and just make it a directive and see what happens, or we could just direct the CROs that they need to reach out to NSCs to collaborate prior to every neighborhood council meeting.
My suggestion would be that we leave it and see what happens. I'd like to, that's certainly a collaboration that should be happening on a regular basis, whether or not the NSCs are part of OPD or not. And I'm sorry that Joe DeVries isn't with us. I'd love to hear what his perspective is on that. Acting Lieutenant Johnson.
Yeah, so this is something that we're still doing, even though they're at the city level. We are still collaborating with the NSCs. We're there at the meetings together. They still ask us to help out with different projects or community concerns. So this is something that we are still doing.
Great. Question for you, Lieutenant Johnson, is there ever any confusion or slipping through the cracks of like sort of that touch of collaboration prior to meetings? Like you were supposed to call me or I was supposed to call you, anything like that, that we want to try to correct here?
No, so for the East End, we still have our NSCs working close with the actual CROs. They're in the same office with us. They have an office at the department, and they also have an office downtown. So they're back and forth. So we work hand in hand.
Well, that's another question or a related question, Lieutenant Johnson. Have you actually seen any real substantive difference between the collaboration of CROs and NSCs since the NSCs went to the city administrator?
Well, not on the East End, because as you know, I've worked with the NSCs for many years. So I've kind of, I have a bond with them, and the same with my officers. I try to get them to all work together because they're an important part of our operation, you know, as far as connecting with the community.
I certainly couldn't agree more. The NSCs are an absolute critical part of this whole equation of community policing. Just no two ways about it. So are we good with leaving number 6 as it is with that wording of should collaborate prior, etc.? If so, and how about that's A, how about B? Providing the NSCs the CRO's report prior to the meeting. We're good with that?
By the way, in 6A, initial cap B for beat. But Jesse will go through and conform all of those.
So
Okay.
so does the word CRO's report, that report, that's the report out to the NSCs, or sorry, the neighborhood councils?
Yes, that's what my inclination would be. Yes.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
that's what we're referring to in number 2.
That's correct.
And that's just so that we're clear, that's something that we have changed from an agenda to just a presentation. So now we're inconsistent and internally inconsistent.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, because right now there is no requirement for a written report at the meetings, right? At the neighborhood council, there's no requirement that anything be in writing. Correct.
From the CROs,
Correct.
other than the
Crime
terms and
data.
rates.
Yeah.
So they will provide the written. So we should clarify what we mean by providing a copy of the CRO. We're providing the NSCs with the CRO's report
So
prior to the meeting.
maybe the department members could clarify, like, what is the report? Is this happening? Is it written? And to what extent does it need to be written, or should it be written?
Should we change the word report for presentation so it refers to what we have in 2?
Hey, Jose, I think that's a great idea. Take a presentation because it allows for leeway and also a desire, from the community. Some people like presentations more than just paper reports.
So let me put you on the spot, Captain Fable. So are these reports happening? Are they written? And it sounds like they should be, or at least this policy envisions that they're given to NSCs prior to the meeting, and therefore might be given prior to the neighborhood council prior to the meeting. Is that what's currently happening?
No, there's a set standard in Measure Y that we use to report out on specific statistical data that was consistent across the CROs. We wanted to avoid having essentially just a larger template for crime data, because I think what happens is that locks the CRO into kind of a robotic mindset in his presentations, and it takes away just from their own personal, charisma and contact with the community. It just becomes a delineated process. Some people like that, but from a majority of the people that we spoke to, they wanted just basic stats and then just have the CRO personally report out what they felt was paramount to the beat.
Okay, so written reports are not
There's no formal requirement, no, sir.
happening. So this prior report or providing of the report is just what the CRO wants to present. Okay.
Yeah, strongly encouraged that, whenever a new CRO comes in, they're very strongly encouraged to talk to the community, ask them, what stats do you want to hear? What crime trends do you want to hear? And then they report out on that.
Yeah. That's certainly the way it should be. So do we want to leave want to have B read as follows? The CROs should provide NSCs with the CRO's presentation prior to the meeting. If that works for everybody, then let's move on to section D, living room meetings. This is kind of a unique concept. I've yet to have one of these living room meetings, but anyhow, Acting Captain Febble, what's your perspective on these living room meetings? Are they all that common? How they worked when they've happened? I've never been in on one, frankly.
Well, now that surprises me, being one of the biggest community advocates out there, Mr. Dorado, that you haven't attended one. We got to get you in on one. I really like living room meetings. Essentially, they're a meeting that is outside of our formal NC meeting. Sometimes very, very small niche communities within a larger beat will have immediate concerns for the CRO. And so they present a couple positives, but they present a couple negatives. The positives is that it's always a great opportunity to collaborate with the community on a more personal level. It's less formal, so that it's a more intimate area that people can really get to know each other, and conversations tend to flow really well. The downside to them is two things I would say, strong downsides, is that they tend to circumvent the NC meetings, which I really want to discourage. I want everybody to attend an NC meeting where priorities can be established based on the rules of the city. And so some people will want to just create large living room meetings and just fully bypass an NC meeting. I think that's a shortfall with living room meetings. And secondarily, some citizens try and force the CRO into living room meetings, and logistically, it's not always plausible for them to pull that off because we mandate that they attend the NC meeting. So they're great for community collaboration. They're great for micro intelligence for small communities. But when I see more living room meetings going on, I see the NC meetings shrink in participation, which I really discourage.
Interesting.
Are they,
Go ahead, Ben.
are these living room meetings held in West Oakland and Deep East Oakland? Are they just held in the more affluent areas of the city?
I've only attended a living room meeting below MacArthur Boulevard. I have not attended a living room meeting up in the hills personally. But I will have to put some context in it. We kind of use the word living room meeting a little more liberally these days. And the original living room meeting was like a very small living room atmosphere with a very, very small niche community. We've kind of opened it up to say anybody who's requesting a private meeting with the CRO, we typically are now just labeling those as living room meetings, just to give context to the group here.
Okay.
How often? Oh, sorry, Mr. Farmer, go ahead.
No, I just feel like the term living room meeting might be a little bit outdated because it even says here under D1 that it could also be a local facility, such as, you know, just an intimate setting. I think that is the goal of the, you know, living room meeting, such as a library recreation center. So that's all.
What they're really good for, guys, what they're really good for is, let's say, unfortunately, we get a spike of a prolifically violent crime in an area. We get like multiple robberies, or heaven forbid, we get a double murder in a very small part of a community in a short period of time. We want to encourage our CRO to hold that meeting if the stakeholders want to participate, because people get really, you know, traumatized by these incidents. And I think the presence of a CRO and community stakeholders at those meetings is critical at those times. Like, we can't wait for NC meeting to deal with that trauma. We need to get there immediately.
I certainly would agree with that.
Farmer.
Dr. Kaplan-Febble, was there any connection with this concept and the barbershop meetings I heard about a couple years ago?
Oh, those were great. Those were by Captain Hookfin, developed the barbershop meeting. What the barbershop meeting is it was literally in a barbershop. So it combined two unique entities in the community, which are very important: merchants as well as community members. But the difference with a barbershop forum is that they were specifically focused on positive engagement. It was not a gripe fest, but it was highly monitored to talk about collaboration between community members and stakeholders, you know, at the city, including the police department, on just how to come up with creative solutions. They were pretty cool meetings, but they have to have a very strong moderator to control those meetings, because it's very easy to dwell into negativity. And the ones that I participated in, and I've participated in Oakland, Antioch, Richmond, many different cities, to see how they were held. If you had a strong moderator, they were great, productive meetings.
Interesting.
Mr.
Yeah,
Farmer.
it's something that my experience in a lack of experience in my case. I've not attended one of these, so that would be very interesting. Are they still going on? Because I'd certainly like to attend one.
You know, I haven't attended one in several years, which I think is unfortunate. I think that Captain Hookfin was kind of the pioneer of that strategy. And I think it would just be something really cool to put out there to local merchants. I mean, recently I've been attending a lot of community meetings on Beat 31 with merchants down there. And there's a lot of constructive conversation going on. So I just think it was just kind of a trend that just kind of lost traction.
Could you, would you mind checking with, is it Captain Hookfin or Lieutenant Hookfin?
It was Captain Hookfin. I'd love to
Captain.
check in with him, sir, but he literally retired this week.
Oh, he's retired now.
He just retired this week, you know, after
Oh my
over
goodness.
20 years of service. Good for him. But, you know, it's not a difficult premise. It's no different than a lot of our community meetings. It's just that the people who participate have to understand that the moderator is in full control, and the conversation is based on the moderator. But they're really fun. I could actually reach out to him privately. I'm sure he'd provide me an outline.
That would be great. It would certainly, that, you know, that kind of a experience should be preserved. Brenda.
Yes, question. It's the CRO who initiates these living room meetings, or can the community ask for a living room meeting?
All of the living room meetings that I've attended, and I've attended many, have all been initiated by the public.
Okay.
Yeah,
Farmer.
I was just going to jump in and say that I just think it's more accurate to call for Section D, an intimate setting meeting, because that's what's being discussed. Barbershops, living rooms, libraries, or some other intimate setting. It just feels like, after hearing all the comments and reading this section, that it just feels more accurate to call it that rather than a living room meeting. Just call it an intimate setting meeting.
Brenda.
I'm sorry, I didn't take my hand down. I apologize, but I agree with Omar.
Yeah,
Maybe we
yeah,
should call it something other than living room.
I certainly agree, particularly because it can be either positive or negative in the sense that I certainly agree with Acting Captain Feble in terms of dealing with the trauma in certainly in a street where there's been a murder. I think it'd be eminently useful to have a meeting of the people directly affected by that horrific event. And have them meet directly with OPD, with the CRO particularly, and have a conversation around that event. So yeah, I'm in agreement that some other sort of a name such as intimate setting would be appropriate.
But I just want to, I would hope that the policy could capture that these meetings, while encouraged, they are optional, because the CRO really has to gauge the attendance of these meetings to not devalue the NC meeting, because there's nothing more important to a CRO than an NC meeting. And every once in a while, we could capture people who are trying to create their own meetings outside of the NC meetings. And so sometimes we have to say, unfortunately, I will not be able to attend this meeting. I encourage you on this date to attend our NC meeting where we're going to discuss all these things. It just has the policy has to capture the discretion of the CRO on the attendance of these meetings.
I have a comment, Jose, if I
Go
can.
ahead, Brenda.
Is in the back. You know what? This could be a kind of restorative justice type of meeting, a community healing type of meeting that they can have, particularly to say a big event that has so greatly affected the community, and we can get some restorative justice practitioners even to attend the meeting and stuff and talk. So again, still intimate setting, but we can look to employ restorative justice principles at this kind of meeting.
I think
that's great. I have a good example too. You folks will hear about it today. Last night was an extremely challenging night for our communities in East Oakland, as well as the department. We had a sideshow that came from multiple states that settled in on East Oakland. We had 2 violent collisions that are likely to result in death. We had a homicide resulted, from the sideshow, and we had an officer who was on a post on one of these violent collisions get struck by a vehicle and injured, all in a single night. So this would be a great example of opportunity for CROs to reach out to our community members in East Oakland to talk about this, because we literally dealt with this incident from 11 p.m. last night all the way until 6 a.m. this morning. Just very, very challenging for everybody in East Oakland. I'm sure the community is going to be very upset when they see what happened last night from people who came literally from Texas to destroy our town.
Wow.
Just there's almost no words to respond to something like that, but certainly I'm sure we all would like you, Acting Captain, to take back our best wishes to the injured officer. It's beyond infuriating to hear this kind of stuff. But certainly that's an example of an intimate setting meeting that's totally appropriate to deal with what happened. And I want to go back to what Brenda said. I think that's an excellent point about a restorative justice setting for an intimate setting meeting. The example I've been using and talking to people about restorative justice is you got Miguel for example, on a block blasting his music at 2 o'clock in the morning, and hopefully the block leader that's been identified and trained and familiar with Miguel goes up and tells him, hey, you got to turn that music down. And if that doesn't work, then there's a succession of community responses that can be applied. The point being that ultimately at some point you would hope that there be a meeting like this, an intimate setting meeting, where Miguel has to explain to his neighbors why he felt it necessary to be blasting his music at 2 o'clock in the morning, and have ideally again, using restorative justice principles, have the community come up with a consequence for to restore the balance in the block. Maybe Miguel needs to spend the next couple of months down at Walgreens picking up trash, or acting as a crossing guard, for the local school, etc. But that kind of a setting, as opposed to having Miguel go to jail or be in front of a judge or something, yeah, I think is a far more appropriate sort of a resolution. And certainly, I think it speaks to what can be accomplished in an intimate setting meeting. So that was a really good point, Brenda. I'm glad you brought that up. So are we good?
Could I just ask a couple of questions of Captain Fable or Lieutenant Johnson? So how often are these meetings occurring? Maybe just on a monthly or annual basis? And who is usually facilitating or moderating these meetings?
So the meetings were actually really ramping up prior to COVID. We were attending multiple a month, and that's almost kind of where my concern grew, was that I was seeing that the living room meetings were frequent, and then I would attend our NC meeting and they were shrinking, and so that was a challenge. So, but to answer your question, they were absolutely frequently occurring. They were all reached out by individuals in the community who wanted to have a more intimate setting with their CRO. Now that we've seen some release of restrictions in COVID, we're hoping to be able to participate in more meetings. Thus far, Lieutenant Johnson and I have really been participating in merchants meetings. I think that they're a bit more proactive, but maybe there's a marketing aspect to this, that people need to realize that this service is available to them. But we also, again, want to balance that with our NC meeting.
Sure. And who is moderating these meetings or leading the meetings?
We actually allow the living room meeting to be pretty much moderated by the requester. Like, if this community member A says, I'd like for you to come to my home, and I've invited 20 of my neighbors over, we allow them to moderate the meeting. We ask them that if they have like a very specific, statistical question, to please provide those ahead of time so that we're aware. But again, in these meetings too, a lot of the conversation is among neighbors and stakeholders. The police play a little lesser role in it. We're not the primary.
And are there meetings where you think that perhaps should be more, where there should be a more neutral facilitator or someone to be brought on board? One type of meeting more than any other type of meeting?
I've only seen a couple meetings where neighbors had passionate disagreements, we'll say. And I think that goes to what Ms. Brenda was talking about, kind of the restorative justice piece. You had a neighbor that was kind of a bad actor, and got a little offended by the community essentially putting them out there and saying, hey, please stop doing this. But I've never found a moment where any of these meetings needed an independent moderator. But to Brenda's point, if we're doing a restorative justice approach, it would be great to have our neighborhood law court attorney present at these, because the neighborhood law court attorney would encourage the bad actor to agree with the citizens and what they believe is the restorative justice portion of it, but be able to remind them, if you're not willing to participate in restorative justice, we could elicit A, B, C.
Okay. And then sort of on that thread, right? Bad actors are not necessarily just community members. Occasionally they are department members. To what extent do you think, issues of like hearings, discipline, whatever, where officers who might have been the bad actor would be willing to or could engage in these types of settings?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you what, if because I fall forward and make mistakes all the time. If I could go to a restorative justice meeting and get that off my record, I would do it in a heartbeat. I say that with humor. But our MOU is extremely streamlined and documented on the disciplinary process. I don't really know if that would be an option. That would be a great question for our
Sure.
union. We have Lieutenant Hubbard, great guy. I'll invite him to one of these meetings because I think that's a great question. I'll be honest with you. You know, our officers make mistakes every day. And the number one thing they want to do is fall forward, right? We take responsibility for our actions. You know, sometimes it's embarrassing, you know, when we lose our cool and get upset with a community member. And a lot of guys do want to get it off their chest, whether that's within our memorandum of understanding. I don't know. That would have to be a follow-up.
Sure, because my thought is like, you know, we have the MOU, there is the MOU. There might be sort of directions on how discipline can happen, but perhaps there's also an agreement that if an officer participates in something like this, a restorative justice component, all parties agreeing, nothing that's said in the meeting can be used in litigation, etc. Perhaps the officer might prefer that as opposed to a letter, a reprimand, something in their file, whatever it may be, kind of like diversion for police officers, right? And that creates space for this to happen.
No, you know, I mean, I could not agree more. I mean, if that was an option, there is no doubt in my mind that a significant majority of officers would participate in that, because I think everybody realizes like, yeah, you know what, I made a mistake. I need to right the wrong. If I can make the person, you know, feel better and let them know that, you know, it wasn't malicious, I owe them an apology, versus a large stain on my record, you know, for 5 years for a momentary lapse of judgment. I don't know too many people who would not be willing to participate in that. That's an innovative and great idea.
Mr. Farmer?
Hey, just curious, does OPD collaborate with DVP ever on these types of meetings, or any of their personnel, violence interrupters or restorative justice personnel, anything like that?
DVP is like literally my number one go-to. I mean, they are an invaluable asset in my crime plan in the city. They're really good when it comes to matters of neighbors and escalation attention, where the police do not have a role. It may be largely civil, or it might be a very minor violation that we just can't really follow up on. You know, Reverend Demita is, I mean, she's amazing. I frequently use her.
Yeah, so I was just thinking maybe it would be a good idea to maybe put them in there, at least mention them somewhere. So thank you.
No, absolutely. They're a great partner.
Yep. And there are other, there may be other partnerships as well, restorative justice partnerships. And, you know, sometimes part of the restorative justice process too is just getting the officers to realize that they don't need to be so unnecessarily rude and nasty in talking to people. You know, I'm going to go back to towing. You don't need to be rude. You don't need to be nasty. You don't need to say, I'm towing your car and I don't care what you do, even though there's no tow truck even there for you to say, you know, well, no, you can't move your car. I'm not going to let you have it and stuff. So those kinds of things is kind of like talk respectfully to people and understand what kind of threat you're posing when you're getting ready to tow their only means of getting to work and stuff, or getting their kids to school. And make sure you do it right. You know, if you don't have a citation, don't tow a vehicle. You haven't issued a citation, don't tow a vehicle. You know, the person should not have to go down to pay the money to get out, and they should not have to ask for a tow hearing and go through all of that in order to be treated fairly. So there's a lot. And yeah, my new pet peeve is the towing process and everything, because I think there's some things going on there that we just really need to put a spotlight on.
Understood. But I wanted to back up and underscore the back and forth between Jesse and Acting Captain Febble, which I really think is significant. The idea that there is an option by an officer to apologize, to make amends for his or her behavior, as opposed to going through some sort of formal process that may end up with a letter in their file. I think that is just really is something that we need to definitely keep in mind as an option that we in some sort of way enshrine as a method by which you know, OPD and the community can come together around an issue. So I really just wanted to underscore that because I think I'm so happy that both Jesse and the acting captain brought this up because I think it's really, really significant. It could well be something that we could build on. In the
Yeah.
future.
I agree, and we could indicate which cases are eligible. I mean, if somebody has murdered someone, that's probably not likely to be a case where you're going to just go and apologize and everything if there's an unlawful use of force. So, but yeah, there could be some categories, just as there are in sort of diversion programs. There could be a discipline diversion program, a type of concept.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up, Jesse, and thank you for being open to it, acting captain. I really enjoyed hearing all that. So I wanted to go back and, or at least we're at 11:30. I want to respect everybody's time. I wanted to make sure that we kept in mind the idea that these intimate setting meetings do not take away from neighborhood council meetings, and in fact, depending on the circumstances, that the CRO has the option of saying no, it's just not a particular meeting that I will attend. So I want to make sure that we keep that in mind, moving forward on this idea. So do we want to what do you think, Jesse and Brenda? We want to wind this up at this point and have this be a leave off point. What a great discussion. I just we so much appreciate community members and their participation and their time, especially on a Saturday. Again, we can't thank you enough. So I'm just going to leave it at that and just turn it back to Jesse as the chair.
And Jesse, can you tell us how many more sections we got? We're on page, what, 18?
This was it.
That's the end of the okay.
I think we have a lot of ideas that we built into the meeting section. I'd like to take another crack at it before we actually move away from section 3, because it's the section that we've only spent one session on. Now that I'm out of trial, I think I'll be able to integrate all of our changes into a master document so that we can get a good piece. I suppose next time in 2 weeks, we could come back to this meeting section, see where we're at, and then also I'll have a review of the entire section. Hopefully I will have a clean draft for everyone with track changes from our very, very, very original document and see how far we've come.
Sounds great.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate, as always, you taking time out of your Saturday. I know it's a lot. We try to respect the time. So enjoy your weekends. Be safe. Be happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Thank you.